The idea of hell has existed in some form or another in virtually every civilization throughout history. Almost unanimously, cultures across the world have developed intricate visions of the afterlife, often depicting realms of reward and punishment based on moral conduct. In Chinese tradition, the concept of hell, known as Diyu, presents a complex and multi-layered vision of the afterlife rooted in Buddhist, Daoist, and folk beliefs. Unlike the singular, eternal damnation seen in many Western traditions, Diyu is an elaborate underworld composed of multiple levels, each designed to punish specific sins through gruesome and violent tortures. Varying between 10 standard layers and 7,000 layers, this realm serves as both a purgatory and a place of karmic retribution, where souls undergo brutal suffering before they are ultimately reincarnated. But what exactly awaits in this grim underworld? Savage monsters that inflict the most gruesome of tortures? Diabolical machinations set to skin us, boil us, or burn us alive? Or perhaps a never-ending waiting line that's akin to a post office? All such things are possible in the Diyu, the Chinese hell. As the mythology evolved, the levels of the Chinese hell can mean different things to different people. In a sense, the Diyu can be personalized to suit one's fears and weaknesses. For example, I would probably find myself terrorized by spiders wielding knives, whilst you might find yourself in a world without YouTube. Wait, why does this look so good? Whatever the case, you probably wouldn't have any means of having fun, and there certainly wouldn't be any heroes coming to save you. Luckily for you though, today I'm sharing with you some heroes inspired by Chinese lore in today's sponsor, Overmortal, an Eastern fantasy role-playing game that brings the mystical world of the Xinjia right to your fingertips. Overmortal is a mobile-based game that lets players carve their own path to immortality through the absorption of Qi, the life force that flows through all things. As you journey through the mortal realm, the spiritual realm, and eventually the immortal realm, you will unlock the secrets of cultivation, mastering techniques that defy the natural order. But if you venture far enough, you might just find yourself in the eerie realm, a mysterious dimension where the boundaries between life and death blur. Here you'll encounter the darker side of cultivation, where vengeful spirits, cursed artifacts, and forbidden powers await. It's a place where the things we'll talk about in this video end up. One thing that really stood out to me is the ghost cultivation mechanic. Unlike traditional heroes' journeys, this mechanic introduces darker, anti-heroic themes, letting you harness mysterious uncanny powers through yin energy, as well as allowing you to tap into more of a dark side to achieve power, revenge, or something that the typical hero might not necessarily strive for. The game doesn't just feature captivating stories, but it's also combined with card RPG elements. Such a blend offers a rich narrative experience alongside strategic gameplay, allowing you to immerse yourself in the story while planning your moves carefully. Personally, I enjoyed the game's art style. The watercolor painted world is both beautiful and mesmerizing, enhancing the overall gaming experience. Whether you're a fan of idle RPGs, or new to the genre, Overmortal offers an engaging and visually stunning adventure. Don't miss out on this journey to immortality. Download Overmortal today and start your path to ascension. Available on Google Play and App Store. Buddhism, the major religion in Chinese culture, predates even the birth of Christ, having emerged from the Ganges around 500 BC in northern India. Sharing many tropes with Hinduism, specifically the nature of death and the afterlife, Buddhism took on a life of its own, whereby it was heavily influenced, and some might say deviated from the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the philosopher we now know as Buddha. In fact, it wasn't until nearly 2 centuries after his death did these teachings begin to take stock, resulting in not only a real departure from Hinduism, but a system of beliefs and practices that are still relevant today. Several tenets that form the core belief of Hinduism were largely replaced or ultimately left out in the Buddha's new way of teaching. For example, formal rituals, including the likes of animal sacrifice, were no longer a thing to be practiced, and in fact, not even the gods were invited to this New Age party. Instead, Buddha encouraged enlightenment, not through the appeasing of deities, but instead through the inner work enabled by meditation. Through meditation, a person could theoretically reach heaven, the ultimate goal, otherwise known as nirvana, indeed not necessarily a place, but a state of mind equivalent to heaven. On top of this, nirvana could be described from these teachings as a spiritual state, by which one escapes the cycle of death and rebirth, concepts that things like the Diyu and the greater Chinese hells come to hinge on. Essentially, this would be the only way to have escaped the Diyu, or any number of hells in the early Buddhist belief systems. But considering no one can ever achieve this state of nirvana, every person who undergoes the physical death is still essentially ferried into the realm of the dead, where torture and suffering awaits. Whilst Hinduism would later absorb Buddhism in India, Buddhism would find its home through Central, East and Southern Asia, where the teachings of the Buddha lived on. One element that was adopted from Hinduism and continuously preserved was the concept of Naraka. Naraka being a system of hells that correspond with the way in which one lived their life. For example, in the second layer of hell, according to the Hindu Naraka, those who cheated or deceived people would find themselves beaten and tortured in this realm until they lost their vision and were driven insane. Meanwhile, people who lay with prostitutes could expect to find themselves in the 15th layer of Naraka, where they were forced, often by creatures that serve the god of death Yama, known as the Yamadutas, to drink from a river filled with urine, mucus and pus. So indeed, a selective type of punishments for a specific type of people. The good news is, Naraka in both the Hindu account and the Buddhist account is not forever. In fact, it might be more accurate to classify Naraka as more of a purgatory, though one where you get the living hell kicked out of you. Unlike more Western traditions, Naraka is not the ultimate destination for where sinful souls end up, but more so a retributive way station that the soul is bound to pass through, unless of course it achieved nirvana. Here, the soul, as in you, is rectified, reprimanded for your wrongdoings upon the earth, and then sent straight back to embark on your new life. Now it's tempting to think that as these punishments are not for eternity, they are not as bad as the hell we might find ourselves in from the biblical or Quranic traditions. And mathematically, you would be correct. At the very least, it isn't forever. But that's of little comfort when Buddhist texts such as the Sutra on the 18 Hells, a text by the Buddha that details the nature of each layer of the Diyu, tells us that whilst not infinite, those who are sent to the very first layer of hell are made to fight each other with their fists for 135 billion years. Unlike the Puranic texts in Hinduism, which caution people of what hell they might end up in, the Sutra of the 18 Hells gives us no such guidance, but paints a very ruthless and unforgiving set of circumstances that last a really long time. In another layer, the fourth layer to be precise, people who are sent here are burned or boiled for 1800 billion years. That's actually 1.8 trillion, but the text specifies it as 1800 billion, which I think is much more dramatic. For reference, that's like more than 4 times as long as the Earth is theorized to have existed. So have fun. I'm saying that like I won't see you there. Just how many layers of hell there are differs depending on which source you ask. In some capacity, hell in the Chinese tradition evolved over time within various belief systems, where according to surviving texts, punishments could be appropriated to specific audiences. With the exception of more modern interpretations, however, most of these punishments consist of the usual gory details of tongue slicing, bone snapping, and being crushed by boulders. Cataloguing and interpreting every layer of hell according to the ancient texts is no small feat, especially with some texts indicating that there are well over 1,000 layers. For the purpose of this episode, we'll be focusing on the 8 layers of Naraka, these being the principal layers of the Buddhist hell according to early belief systems, as well as the 18 layers according to the aforementioned sutra. Imagine, if you will, 8 vast underground chambers that are all stacked on top of each other. one gigantic department store filled with bleak, desolate voids. This would in essence be the framework of the Naraka hells, with each floor arguably just as worse as the last. The first layer, known in some texts as Samjiva, is the hell of eternal repetition. Yes, it already sounds bad. Here the ground is made of heated iron, making walking on it pretty difficult, especially considering that those who find themselves here will likely be barefoot. To make matters worse, apparitions appear to attack the unfortunate denizens of this realm, with flaming weapons and deadly claws. If the apparitions catch their victim, which it's implied that they always do, they are beaten, usually to death, a second death if you will, only to be magically resurrected and chased again. One can certainly see where the hell earns its aptly named title as the Hell of Eternal Repetition. In the second layer, known as Kala Sutra, the hell of black wire and thread, incision lines are drawn on the sufferer's body. From there, the monsters of this hell perform all kinds of ungodly slits and openings upon the body, dicing the flesh with saws and blades. Samgata is the third layer, and sees the sufferers here crushed repeatedly with giant stones. The torture here is so detailed that it even sees the boulders mince the bones of the body to dust, mulching the entire human vessel into a fine red paste. After this is done, the body is magically restored, and the torture can recommence again and again and again. The fourth layer, and perhaps the most chaotic, is known as the Hell of Lamentation, Rorava. Here, sufferers frantically search for the rumour of safety or shelter from imminent scorching fires. To make matters worse, the ground is already on fire, so you can imagine the carnage of hundreds of thousands of people stampeding one way or another to try and find a patch of ground that isn't charring their feet. The moment one finds a place of reprieve, however, they are respawned in the fires again, and repeat this cycle for a great number of years. Maharorava makes up the fifth layer, and similarly to the fourth layer, is known as the Great Lamentation, where creatures known as the Kravyada hunt down inhabitants of this dwelling and feast on their flesh. In the sixth layer of the Naraka hells, the temperature doesn't get any cooler, as we are told of even more scorching heat. Here, denizens can be expected to be impaled by flaming swords and spears, whereby the body is magically healed after each stab, only for the blade to find its mark over and over again for the foreseeable future. Pratapana, the seventh layer of hell, mirrors much of the sixth layer, where inhabitants can find themselves impaled by flaming weapons. Yet there is an indication here that this hell is much worse than the previous one, with the weapons being larger and the stab wounds being much more aggressive. It's also believed that those who find themselves here do not leave for an exceptionally long time. The eighth and final layer of this hell is Avicii, the hell without interruption. This hell is described as being cube-shaped and designed in such a way that each sufferer is stuffed into their own personal confinement. Although think of it not as a prison cell, but more like an oven. Indeed, those that find themselves here are literally cooked and baked in unbearable temperatures. It is said that this layer of hell is by far the worst, and therefore is reserved for the worst of sinners. In the sutra, known as the 18 hells, as told to us by the Buddha, the layout of Naraka is somewhat different, and actually separated into 8 realms that are hot and 10 realms that are cold. The Buddha specifies that 8 hot fiery realms beneath the earth are stacked on top of each other, whilst the 10 cold hells are actually found where the earth meets the sky. Indeed, a far cry from the Western interpretation, where one may expect to find heaven in the sky. Luckily for us, the hells in this text come not only with an explanation of what to expect, but also a duration of how long we can expect to stay there. Unluckily for us though, none of these durations are encouraging in the slightest. In the first layer of hell, denizens will fight each other with their fists and other weapons for 135 billion years. The second layer of hell is filled with fighting and fire, which we are told alternates from day to day for 270 billion years. I imagine the idea is that one day you are fighting other souls of the dead, and the next day you are being scorched by flames. At least this one has some variety. For those in the third layer, inhabitants alternate between being incinerated and crushed between mountains. This lasts for 540 billion years. The fourth layer sees inhabitants either burned or boiled, which goes on for 1800 billion years. Again, as mentioned earlier, I do like how the translated text phrases the numbers. More burning, boiling and killing can be expected in the fifth layer, which goes on for 2160 billion years. The sixth layer sees even more fire, as well as the addition of crushing iron, which goes on for 4230 billion years. In the seventh layer, described as a place for people rushing between fire and a filthy pit of devouring worms, one might expect to find their days being incinerated or eaten alive by hungry worms. This will last for 8640 billion years. Finally, the eighth layer, the final layer of the hot hells, located deep under the earth, consists of, more fire, more roasting, and more incinerations. This, however, lasts for a whopping 17,280 billion years, and as you might imagine, is reserved for the worst of the worst. It's actually where the YouTube algorithm was born. Please don't tank my videos anymore. The cold hells, meanwhile, are laid out a little differently. By some interpretations, one could access the hell by venturing upwards through the Tibetan mountains. With this, you can see where the notion of cold hells may have come into fruition. The nature of this hell is very complex and almost tediously detailed. The translated text tells us that the first cold hell begins with scorching, but then turns back to freezing, before again turning back to scorching. After this, sufferers are split into two halves and crushed into the ground. The duration can last from, and I'll say this a bit slowly, the same length of time that it takes to remove all the mustard seeds from a mound that equals 10,240 quarts, if you remove one seed every 100 years. It did take me a minute to really get this to sink in, but it's basically trying to tell us that you'd be stuck in this hell for a really long time. The duration is then doubled in the second layer, and then doubled again in the third layer, and so on all the way up to the 10th layer, where there would be 5,242,880 quarts of mustard seeds. Like with the previous concept of hell, this layer is reserved for the very worst of the worst. According to Taoism, Buddhism, and traditional Chinese folk beliefs, Diyu functions as a place of punishment and purification, preparing souls for reincarnation. The deities governing Diyu differ across various accounts. Some ancient Chinese traditions suggest that souls journey to places like Mount Tai, or the ghost city of Fengdu after death. Today, Fengdu and Mount Tai's temples have been transformed into tourist attractions, featuring artistic depictions of hell and the afterlife. Some folk religious-based texts, such as the Taiwanese Journeys to the Underworld, suggest that new hells and punishments emerge over time to reflect modern sins, such as reckless driving, or that existing punishments are updated to reflect modern technological advancements. For example, instead of being stabbed by flaming swords, you could expect to be cut apart by a lightsaber. Other unique locations in the Diyu include the Center for Making Up of Recitations, where religious figures atone for mistakes in scriptural recitations. There's also the City of Innocent Deaths, which houses souls who died unjustly, which can include suicides, accidents, and even abortions by some interpretations. There is something of a process in this concept of the Diyu. Indeed, one isn't just thrust into the layers of hell to serve out their punishment, but rather there does exist a ceremonial induction. Here, each soul must cross a bridge known as the Bridge of Helplessness, and must drink Mengpo soup, a mythological soup that erases one's memories of their past life. Other interpretations see the damned souls ascend to a spot known as the Home Viewing Pavilion, where they will see their loved ones one last time before the effects of the soup kicks in. After this, they are judged and condemned for their sins, and thrown into whatever purgatory or hell that has been decided for them. Once their sentence is served, they are free to leave, returning to the mortal world for their reincarnation. Ultimately, the hells in Chinese mythology can consist of a number of different layers and punishments that vary depending on which text is consulted. Indeed, there is no agreed upon number nor specific torture that can be agreed upon. Much like the Egyptian hell, or the duat, the concept of the underworld could consist of many diabolical things that spread via word of mouth. Whilst there is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which could serve as a guide for deceased souls, even this was considered merely a framework of what one could actually expect to find down there in hell. The Naraka hells, or the Diyu, operate in a similar way, with many writers over the centuries adding or taking away hells depending on their fancy, or evolving the hells to meet the expectations of a modern reader. For example, if we were to consult the Mahavastu, a Vedic text belonging to an early discipline of Buddhism, we find that there were 8 layers of hell with 16 mini-layers that were interwoven into each. Meanwhile, in the Majjhima Nikaya, a collection of Buddhist scriptures compiled between the 3rd century BC and the 2nd century AD, we find descriptions of hell as a fortress that leaks fire from the ceiling and the walls, and whilst there are multiple doorways for escape, all the doors will slam shut the moment someone approaches. With this in mind, hell itself has evolved with humanity, taking with it different elements from previous iterations or creating brand new ones. For example, if we were to consult the 10th century Buddhist tale, Mulian rescues his mother, we find one hell that is actually just a waiting room, with souls that have ended up there by administrative error. They then spend thousands of years negotiating, trifling through paperwork, obtaining permissions and contracts that never arrive, and are ultimately consumed in what is essentially a clerical nightmare. Special thanks to Overmortal for making this video possible. Don't miss out on this journey to immortality, and download Overmortal today to start your path to ascension. Available on Google Play and App Store. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like, as this does trick the algorithm into recommending more of my content. We're really close to 1 million subscribers now, so if you want to help push us over the edge, then do smack that subscribe button and consider becoming a channel member. Until next time.